Hello and welcome to all who are joining us for today's event. I am Elisa Wad, President and CEO of DeVry University, and your host for this important discussion around powering workforce strategies with AI. Joining me as today's co-host is my colleague, Dave Barnett, DeVry's Chief Administrative Officer. Some quick background before we dive in. Our mission here at DeVry is to close our society's opportunity gap and address emerging talent needs by preparing learners to thrive in careers shaped by continuous technological change. And we achieve this goal by actively engaging with industry thought leaders and partners. We firmly believe here at DeVry that our partners' insights and their support are necessary elements in ensuring our programs remain both relevant and up to date and effectively prepare learners for long-term sustainable success. That's one of the many reasons we are delighted to kick off this conversation and to further discuss the integration of artificial intelligence into business practices and workforce development strategies. It's clear that AI is no longer just an element of our future. It's actually actively shaping our present. It's influencing the way business leaders and organizations are approaching pretty much everything from operational efficiency to strategic innovation. The transformation brought by AI demands not just attention, but action. Action towards embracing change, fostering a culture of learning, and preparing our teams for the challenges and opportunities ahead. So our focus today is going to touch on three specific topics. First topic is HR strategies for the AI era, with a focus on methods and practices around equipping teams for the future and really embracing a culture dedicated to ongoing learning. The second topic we're going to touch on today is ensuring our teams are future ready, or as we call it here at DeVry, future-proofing the workforce. And we'll discuss what it means to be prepared for a future where AI plays a central role and how to build talent pipelines, blending the technical know-how with its essential human skills for an AI-driven future. And then last, we'll talk about bridging that skills gap that exists today and likely will continue to exist as technology evolves, really digging into a clear and often utilized pathway to an AI-fluent workforce, which lies in what we like to call upskilling opportunities and partnerships. Our goal coming out of this conversation is to leave you all with actionable insights and strategies that'll help guide your thinking as you prepare for an AI-enhanced future. So with that, Dave and I are very, very excited to be joined by a group of esteemed panelists and experts on today's topic. So without further ado, we would like to have our panel of forward-thinking leaders introduce themselves, starting with Andrea.
Great. Thanks so much. My name's Andrea Sean, head of talent strategy and transformation at Eightfold. Eightfold is a talent-centered, AI-informed platform that is skills-based. And I'm really excited to be here. My background is I worked at American Express for 25 years. I actually implemented the AI transformation for talent while there through Eightfold. And now for the past 3 years, I've spent my time talking to talent leaders all the time about how AI impacts their talent priorities. So really excited to have the conversation today with a great group. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, Andrea.
Hi,
Vic?
I'm Vic Shah, head of talent for Hub International. Hub is one of the largest insurance brokers in the world. By background, I actually started off in business and finance and kind of backdoored into HR. I worked across both public and private organizations, all within a realm of talent, HR business partnerships. And, I think this is a really interesting topic. I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation, so I appreciate the invite.
Thank you, Vic.
And this is Mike Anderson. I am the Chief Digital and Information Officer at Netskope. We're a global cloud security company, protecting over 30 of the largest companies in the world today. As part of my role, I lead strategy, but I also am the executive sponsor for our early in career employee resource group that we have today. I'm passionate about talent because as a technology leader, we have to find a way to build talent pipelines in our organization. And obviously from a from a CIO perspective, AI is front and center in all the things that we're talking about and what we're looking at. And so I'm excited to be part of this conversation, honored to be with this esteemed panel.
Thank you, Mike. Like I said, very, very forward-thinking leaders on today's event. So thank you all for being here. Let's dive right in. Lots to talk about, and you all have a lot of information to share with our audience. So let's start with HR strategies for the AI era. Obviously, AI is shaping future HR strategies, and at the same time, HR leaders are tasked with preparing teams for a future where AI and human expertise sort of coalesce to drive innovation and productivity. And I'm sure that shift has come or will come with its fair share of challenges. So, Vic and Andrea, what specific challenges, maybe we start with Vic, what specific challenges do HR leaders face in your experience when trying to build adaptability within their teams in the context of AI integration?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I think it starts with operating with an understanding of what it means, right? And what I mean by that is like HR and AI, there are crosshairs there, and we need to identify where those crosshairs are. The interesting thing is that AI is a logic-based system, right? It doesn't have judgment. So what that really challenges us with is how are we collecting, organizing, and distributing our data, right? If our data is clean, it's good, it's organized, then we find a path of logic and judgment actually being correct. If it's just logic based and there's no judgment, then AI is just a tool of summarizing information. But if logic and judgment actually hit properly, it's a really powerful tool in HR.
Yeah, that's great. What I would add to that, what I think is really interesting, if you think about Skills AI, what it does is makes things easier for all the stakeholders, right? And somehow making things easier can be hard. So really, a lot of what AI is trying to do is bring transparency, right? So that leaders can understand the skills they have in the organization, employees can see transparently what are the opportunities for them beyond even their organization, and candidates can really find the right roles for themselves. And so this change, I think, is really about making things easier, but it takes, a moment to really help all the different stakeholders understand how to do things easier. I think the challenge HR faces, though, is today kind of the technology and the infrastructure and the processes and the culture that we have is probably underinvested in terms of how to do things with transparency and better data. And so trying to move to a place where you've got those tools that you need and be able to leverage them is a good amount of change, right? To think about and to really understand the potential of what you can do with your talent.
I love what you both said. And, it's about understanding that AI is there to support, it's there to power teams. And really, it's about making sure that folks sort of understand and have the knowledge and skills necessary to interact with these tools in the workplace, to feel like these tools and this technology is supporting them in making their jobs easier and their lives easier. I love that. Mike, are there any examples that come to mind when you sort of take a step back and think about successful strategies or programs that, in your experience, have effectively prepared teams for the evolving demands of AI in the workplace?
Yeah, and I'll back it up. If we think back over the past 25, 30 years, every time we have a major transformational technology, I remember I had a boss early in my career that had said he went and told all of his people they need to learn how to type because the computer is going to be a big thing. And if you don't have good typing skills, it's going to impact your ability to be successful. And then if you look at every technology that we've deployed, think about internet. Everyone was afraid of what jobs were going to get displaced by the internet. And then what we found is every time you have these big technology transformations, they actually become job creators in the future. And I think we'll see the same thing here with AI. And the first thing people do is we're all humans first. And so human psychology always kicks in around how does this impact me? And so one of the things to do is make sure you communicate from a change management standpoint. Here's what the future could be. Be thinking about what those future job possibilities could be, and start looking at what are those foundational skills. Like prompt engineering is a skill that I try to really get people focused on. How do you ask the right questions? The other thing is just there's a lot of talks around the, how we treat machines. Do we say please and thank you? And so making sure we bring humanity into our conversations as well. And so that's something as well. Don't forget, as we start to have our Gen AI friends working in the environment, the common courtesies and things like thank you and please still have a place. And so prompt engineering is one of the key skills that we're trying to get people to learn today. Like processing and researching documents is a great way to do that. You can have Chat GPT or Gen AI read a 300-page document and summarize it for you, but you got to ask the right questions about that document. So learning how to ask good questions is one of the best skills that you can do when you're preparing for training around AI.
Great. And Vic and Andrea, any perspective on that? I think your example, Mike, of going back to the days of using a computer, right? I think about the calculator. Now we can't live without these, and it's just it's getting people's minds around AI and the power of AI and how to properly use AI to make their lives easier. So appreciate that perspective as well.
Let me take our conversation in a slightly kind of different route to build on what we've talked about. There's research upon research that talks about AI is going to either create job neutrality or job growth, right? And that we know there's going to be as many, if not more, jobs as a result of AI. And some folks might be AI builders, many will be AI users. And so as we think about the skill sets that are most important in the workforce today, what are some of the new skills? What skills are critical as people move into an AI-powered future? Maybe Andrea, you could start on this question for us.
Yeah, well, actually, I have some a summary of kind of technology and AI, and I love this page because it tells you a lot in a really clear way about kind of all these big trends that are happening, right? So you have AI and big data as one example, but there's others. There's cloud computing, Internet of all things, and cybersecurity, right? So you can see the use cases here for each of these different types of rising technologies and innovations, right? And they're really critical, right? The use cases include things like intelligent automation, fraud analytics for AI. If you look at cloud computing, it's the agility of your business systems, right? The ability to have cost optimization and how you apply your business. And then Internet of all things is obviously a lot around the customer experience, the digital customer experience. And then cybersecurity, I think we all understand all kind of managing all the threats and making sure kind of you have security for your data. So these are, in terms of the use cases and the business needs, they are so vital to the fundamentals of running your business. And then what you see here also is the new skills, right? Some of the key skills that are rising. And this actually is data that we see in our skills trend analysis. And you can see all these different skills. I think anyone that's in either talent acquisition, talent management, or any type of technology roles understands that these are skills that are really important. And they're also very competitive. Because when I talk to leaders across every industry, not just technology and high tech industries, but across every industry, these skills are really critical. And we take a look at the prevalence of these skills across organizations. We tried to indicate, like, what is the talent readiness of the industries in terms of having the prevalence of these skills. And you can see most of them are in kind of red status, meaning the prevalence of these skills is still quite low. You might have cloud computing here is in yellow, which is, at least that's good to be out of the red. But you can see that the prevalence of these skills tends to be still low in the organizations. So if you look at the use cases and the criticality of the business needs going into the future, I think what you understand is that organizations have to take a purposeful look at growing these skills. And not really kind of let it to chance that you're going to be growing these skills. So just highlighting to your question, like what is happening with regards to AI, but all technical skills and why skills so critical as an area of focus.
That's incredibly helpful, and I love just the data-rich approach to the skills that you're seeing related to these areas. Vic, Mike, what are you experiencing? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing is like a little bit of what Andrea said, but also just being an optimizer, right? Like a continuous learner, and not to sound so cliche, but I feel, Dave, you prompted the question in a really interesting way, which is there's going to be job growth, and you're going to have individuals that maybe work in a capacity where they know their space really, really, really well. Who else best to optimize that space, both from the structure of data, the organization of data, and actually putting it together, right? So I think that, having a mindset of how to drive process, how to optimize the information that you have and put it in a structured format so that AI ultimately, if it does come in from the back end, can provide that logic and judgment that we talked about before. I think that there's a path there, right, for an individual contributor that may not have the same technical acumen that was just shared.
Yeah, I would add on to it. It's great points. I love the one around the continuous learning. Because one of the skills I would say that is important in every kind of technology or anything in life is curiosity, and learning every day, being curious, asking questions. When there's opportunities to take on stretch projects, take those opportunities. I learn new skills all the time, like how to solve math problems. I love storytelling as a good skill to always learn, because my daughter says you've never lived until you've cried at the table with your father doing math homework. So I was doing math homework with my son, and they were teaching these new methods that were very different than what I learned it, many years ago. And so I asked ChatGPT how to do it. And it gave me the way I always did it. And I said, show me how to do it with wizardry. And it showed me the way the teacher was teaching in school today. So it teaches you can always learn new things in this process. I think the point that Vic made around data preparation, I think everyone's been waiting for that magic pixie dust you can sprinkle on data and make bad data good data. Unfortunately, it doesn't. And so being able to understand business process that creates data and make sure you actually have a business process that's creating data to analyze first and foremost, especially when we're thinking about internal data, that's a key component. And so it's kind of like generative AI, and AI is a tool that we have on our tool belt. It's like going from the screwdriver to the drill. I can get there a lot faster with my drill than I can by turning it by hand with a screwdriver. But I've also got a hammer, and I've also got I've got a level, and I've got other tools I use. And so don't just take this and say, okay, every problem is going to be solved with AI, because that's not the answer. There's a lot of other tools that need to be used and skills we need to have in order to use this. But when you're on this journey, make sure that you're, I've had teams before where I've said, look, this is the journey we're going on as a leader, and we want to invest in you to learn these skills. And we can't force you to do it, and that's your choice. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. That's a decision you take. But we're willing to invest in you to learn these skills. And I think that that helps to disarm that human psychology of how's this going to impact me. So I think just as important as understanding what skills are important, it's also help make sure you take people through that change process as well.
Yeah. I love the analogy that you just shared on the tool belt. That's like so true. I think one of the things I would also highlight, what's really interesting to me, is that I've seen the data that this applies not just to technical roles, but it actually applies to marketing, sales, right? HR. We're seeing skills that are rising that are related to new tools that are available, new ways of tracking, like if you're in sales, new tools to help you really manage kind of the prospects you're pursuing, and to do that successfully, have CRM. So I would just say this agility of learning applies to like literally everybody, right? Every function, whatever it is, has new developments in terms of whether it's tools that they're using or ways that they have to approach things. So I would just like to highlight that's important to pretty much everybody in the workforce these days.
I think
Can I jump in? Can I jump in one more time? Mike, you touched on something where you talked about sitting at the dinner table working on a math problem, and you mentioned it in part of your response to the other question too, around the the ability to prompt. So the art of knowing what kind of question you want to ask, I think is going to be such an incredible skill set that I feel is going to blow up in the next decade, right? Like the ability to really think about the question that you're asking and the output that you're looking to receive. Like Mike, if I was in your situation, I probably wouldn't have asked that second part of the wizardry question. I probably would have just taken ChatGPT's original answer and been like, "This is how we do it." But you knew to take the next question, right? You asked the part B, and to me, that's a skill. That's a skill because that's an understanding of what the power of the tool can actually do for you.
I think that's critical. First, the wizardry captures everything about school age mathematics now, for certain for me. So I love that, and we'll use that in many venues from here on. But I think the power of a well-placed question is incredible. And to your point, really across the panel, the ability to ask the right question or questions is going to matter tremendously as we go forward. Some of that's critical thinking. Some of that is just straight intellectual curiosity. And at DeVry, that's one of our fundamental beliefs, is the notion of that we should be curious about all that we approach, and that individuals should always be lifelong learners, whether it's our students, whether it's our alumni, whether it's our colleagues, that lifelong learning is critical as we deal with a world where there's hyperchange and things are evolving and moving so rapidly. We talked a bit about the critical skills, and we've talked a bit, and we'll talk more about the idea of upskilling and reskilling organizations to be well prepared. But let's pivot for a second and talk about pipelines of talent. How are you looking at pipelines from outside your walls of how we establish strong pipelines of well-educated individuals that can thrive both from a technical acumen perspective, but also about these skills we just talked about?
Yeah, I'm happy to start there. When I think about teams, I've always, one of the things I've tasked when I was at Schneider Electric, I was their North America CIO before joining Netskope. And one of the things we did, it was partnering with local universities. We actually partnered with technical universities like DeVry as well, where they were teaching people skills. And we actually measured our managers on how are they bringing in our people managers, and how are they bringing talent into the organization. So it wasn't just about filling a job; it was about filling a job, bringing in new talent, so that we knew that if we hired the right people, if we were hiring digital natives in the case of technology, that if we did the right hiring, they were going to be looking for a bigger job within the next 18 to 24 months. And we needed to create those growth opportunities, because people leave organizations when they feel like they don't have a career path. And so if we want to be able to continually change our organization, and everyone's fighting over the person that has 10 years of experience. I guarantee there's no one out there with experience of 10 years of experience with generative AI. Now, AI has been around for a long time, and so everyone's fighting over that person has all the skills. But every time you add job requirement to a resume, it's if you think about a sales funnel in the sales world, every time you add a requirement, that funnel gets smaller and smaller. And so I used to tell my teams, you're looking for the one person in the entire country that has that skill set. And so that's why it's important to create those partnerships. And we actually measured people on that. But it's also make sure that you create the right measures from a diversity and equity inclusion. So are you looking at gender diversity? Are you bringing in different perspectives in that talent pipeline? And so some of that means you have to go talk to people that are in middle school or high school, especially when you talk about, for example, women in Mexico, where I built a large team. There was just the people in the population was, 1 in 10 of the students in technology were women. And so we knew to play a long game, we had to encourage middle schoolers and people that are in high school to actually pursue those careers, so we could have a equal talent pool to pull from in that talent pipeline. So partnering with universities, partnering with establishments like DeVry has been key for me in building those pipelines and growing my own internal talent.
I love everything you just said. I think what I would say, what I heard and kind of what you just shared is just you're being very purposeful about it, right? You have to be now. Like certain skills are really competitive, making sure you're kind of being very inclusive of the talent are really important things. And that means you have to be really thoughtful. And so your example of even looking deeper into even middle school and what is the pathway to kind of bring them into becoming the talent that's really important to to your company or any company. I think that is a really important point here. If I go back to the page I shared, right, the competition for skills and the importance of those skills are really critical. And so it can't be left to chance. So being purposeful about that, I think, is important. Those examples you just shared are examples of that. I would say the other thing too that's important is also identifying strategically what are the skills that you need to drive your business results. So what are the business priorities you're driving across different functions, and making sure you're very clear on what skills I need, and then being very purposeful when you're thinking about acquiring new talent, making sure that you're acquiring those skills, in your workforce so you can drive those business results. So again, just being purposeful about that, and then being able to identify, that pipeline of individuals, and oftentimes that's some of the most competitive talent out there, and being able to kind of build relationships with them is what I find is really critical, right? If you don't have those relationships, it's really hard to compete. If, a candidate is in a lot of competition across companies, kind of the credibility of your company, your brand, the culture, and the fact that you've kind of extended a relationship to them, and feel that talent is important, is really critical to compete for skills. So I think being able to do that becomes very important.
I'm going to have a small piggyback to what both Mike and Andrea said. It's not an elongated piggyback, I promise. And it's, Andrea, to your point of having the purpose, I'll use a word slightly different. It's also the sequence, right? And everything that we solve for, it comes with a certain level of sequence. Having an understanding of what the most critical need is imperative. Like, we can't get stuck into this FOMO model where because everyone else is doing it, therefore we must do it, right? Or else we just start funneling and we're not quite sure what we're going after, what skills we're trying to build, and what type of talent we need to go find, and what partnerships we need to go identify, right? So understanding what that business imperative is, I think, Andrea, as you suggested it, to me is a building block number one, possibly building block zero to this challenge. Without that being identified, it's really hard to do the next stair step model of what you're going to go after and where you're going to go after and how you're going to partner.
It's really interesting, Vic, and you hit on something that I think matters a lot for HR professionals as we think about build and buy strategies for talent. What are the places where we want to build internal talent pipelines, and what are places where we need to build external talent pipelines? Just as organizations think about that, for them, DeVry thinks about that at a larger scale, right? And we're thinking about that as being talent pipeline supplier for the economy. And it's an interesting piece because we're talking about multiple time horizons. One of our beliefs is, as folks enter tech-powered careers, digital fluency, digital nativeness matters because we're touching those things. But we have to not only build competency, but confidence, right? And so DeVry, through our Smart Futures program, we actually invest in working with folks at younger ages through STEM labs, with Boys and Girls Club of America, working with middle schools to help build digital programs for girls, to help build fluency and comfort with technology. That long ramble really is to bring up the question of, how are you thinking about timeframes as it relates to skills pipelines? How do you think about the balance of immediacy versus building pipelines to fuel where we're headed inevitably toward the future?
Okay, maybe I'll start, Mike. I think both of us started responding at the same time. Well, look, I'm early days in my new organization, but the one place that I'm looking at is, and I don't know, Dave, if I'm addressing your question head on, where I view immediacy is I look at work that's being done at a voluminous pace. And I try to figure out, okay, so how do we optimize that, right? Where do we start to help optimize that? What skill set do we need to optimize that? Is that going to come in the format? So from a recruiting standpoint, if we were to introduce a chat box into our recruiting platform, will that help the candidate experience? Will that help ultimately our recruiters refine and get to the answer much closer in terms of who's going to be a better fit, right? Those are the types of questions that we're asking in terms of like, how can AI help us immediately?
Sure.
But it's a challenge, right? I think that it is, and every day you hear of a new iteration or a new version of what can help. So when you think you're ahead on day one, by day four, you're potentially behind. And that kind of goes back to the FOMO mode, right? It's like, I think everyone has to have a North Star in terms of what they're trying to build towards. And it's important to understand what stakeholder are you trying to build towards as well, right? And where do you ultimately drive that experience? Sorry, Mike, I'll give you back the mic. No pun
No,
intended.
I think it's I talked about before playing the long game with middle school and high school. I think it's like for anybody that's a golfer on here, I'm not a huge golfer. I can go out and swing a club, but don't ever take me if you're trying to win money, because I'm not the guy to be in the cart with you. I promise. But you've got not every hole is a par three. Sometimes you got par fives. You got to drive the ball a long way. And so when you think about that, you got to be playing there's the short-term things you have to drive, but you can't sacrifice and be so good at your short game, you forget how to do the long game, because you're going to run into a par five again, and you got to be able to get it close to the green or on the fairway to be able to get that shot to get the short game. And so I think we all have to be thinking that way. And if we think about, I'm a certified board director, and we're always thinking at a board level about the strategy of a company. Where are we going 2 to 3 years from now? And sometimes you take decisions that in the short term may not pay off, may not have the exact shareholder return, but you got to sell your investors on this is going to pay off even bigger in the long term. And I think we have to think that way in every context. And I wanted to add on a skills side. I had a CEO once, level 3, Jim Crow, brought our executive team together. He was the CEO. I was a part of a company he was acquired called Software Spectrum. He brought us in and he said, every decision you make, ask yourself, do you want that decision to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal tomorrow? And so when you think about, posting things into ChatGPT, ask yourself, do I want what I'm posting to show up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal tomorrow, or on the front page of the Apple News that I scroll today? So use that same kind of that same kind of judgment. Use your own judgment to decide, is this the right thing? And also read terms and conditions, for like things like Grammarly, for example. Make sure you're paying a paid version, because otherwise everything you type on your keyboard is being put into training a public model that everyone else sees. So just use your judgment that we've all got as one of the skills I say to always focus on.
I think the only thing I would add to this conversation is, in addition to looking externally for talent, employees are a really important place to focus in terms of, kind of building skills. Because I think a lot of what we're seeing in general is, right, the workforce is shrinking, and it's really challenging sometimes to go externally and find the skills. And being able to kind of have the confidence in your employee base and building their skills to help them prepare for the future is I think really important. We see a lot of cost efficiencies that our customers realize from that standpoint. I also think too, you've got a lot of potential in your organization. I know our customers are leveraging some of our AI to understand that potential, like the potential to learn a new skill. Can definitely be identified just because you see, or we see, kind of large populations of workers and what skills they have before they're able to learn another skill successfully. So that's a great predictor to say someone's got an adjacent skill and therefore they have the ability to learn a skill. So what I would say is looking at your workforce is a really important way of thinking about building skills in your organization. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
That's actually a really good segue, Andrea, into bridging the skills gap. And I have to touch on one thing that you said, Mike. First of all, I'm not a great golfer, so you don't want me on the course either if you're looking to win money, but I do golf. And I realize that, back to your analogy on, a par 3 is different from a par 4, different from a par 5. You also need different clubs at each hole. And it sort of ties back to your different tools on the tool belt. And you got to think about that when you think about skills, right? Future proofing your workforce for the AI era is about ensuring that you're building for sustained growth, both as an individual and as an organization, and you're looking to remain relevant. Andrea, that slide that you shared, it was eye-opening. In each of those buckets, it was either red or yellow, right? Technology is just evolving at a rapid pace. And bridging those skills gaps just is becoming more and more important. Making it even more important to, Vic, you said, sort of identifying the need and then bridging those gaps to secure an organization's future success. So I have a question for each of you. So we talked about the need, right? Talk to us about where you have seen partnerships or organizations effectively partner together. We touched on this a little bit, but to either address the AI skills gap or similar skills gaps. Doesn't have to be relevant to just AI. Again, back to Andrea's slide, right? I mean, it's technology as a whole. So, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I can jump into that one. And I just want to build on something Andrea said real quick before I answer that question, which is, when you're in a company, I mean, if you remember at the beginning when Vic introduced himself, he didn't start in HR, but he's in HR and talent today.
Yeah.
And when we're in organizations, I always say it takes more effort to teach someone how a company operates and how to get things done in an organization than it does to teach them a new skill, which segues into how do you partner with companies to find that. And so, one of those that I've done the past, if I have for example, if I want to grow Salesforce knowledge, or if I want to grow financial acumen, I'll go find a partner in it, like a DeVry or someone else where I can create coursework for people to go through to leverage that skill. And then it's about communicating those things out. So that's something that I've done before. A lot of times from an IT, the technology companies I use, I say, hey, can you come teach our people about how to use your technology? Can we host a lunch and learn for you to come in and speak to our teams about that? And there's also what I always say when you're creating these opportunities. A lot of times there's people that are a little bit reticent, but if you create, again, we're all humans and we're all competitive. We don't want to be 80% complete. Say we have a spot for 30 people to be in this training. So the first 30 that volunteer get in, and human psychology will kick in, and you'll get a bunch of people. Then it'll be full, and then you do your next training and you bring that together. And then people don't want to be left behind. They want to learn that new skill. They want to be on that inside group. To use Vic's comment about FOMO, that fear of missing out. They get FOMO because they're not on the initial 30. So in everything you do, use human psychology, because we're all human and people first. So use that in your change management. Use that as you think about skills.
Yeah. I would just also say that, as I mentioned, I talked to a lot of talent leaders, and everyone's struggling with kind of the workforce challenges. And I see a lot of activity happening with partnerships across almost every industry. I definitely see in the medical industry, they've just faced a really bad pain point for talent over the past, obviously, 3-4 years. But I see it in every industry, even in manufacturing, struggling, right, for talent. And so I see more and more, a lot more partnerships oftentimes happening with, higher education, high school, diversity organizations, a lot of different partnerships that are forming because, as I said, you have to be very purposeful about this and making sure you're kind of building the talent you need, because the reality of it is the pain points are being felt across pretty much every industry right now. And so that's kind of what's starting to happen. And I see this pretty regularly across every talent leader that I'm talking to.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, I'm relatively new to this role, so it's not so much of like where I'm in this role, but in past organizations, like where I've seen the partnerships is not much different than what Andrea and Mike shared. I think the difference, though, and at least I might be, my answer may not be answering your question, but it may actually prompt a different type of response, which is what I'd like to see in the partnership, right? What I'd like to see in the partnership is use case, like real use case, right? So if an organization is willing to partner with higher education like DeVry, it's like, how do you bring a real life problem into the world of education so that the person that actually wants to get upskilled in it is working on a real problem? It's not a theoretical problem, right? Right. As adult learners, we want to be able to work on something that's real in front of us. We don't want to read about it. So I'd like to see more of that in the conversations. And to Mike's earlier point, it's like no one has 10 years of experience in this. So that means everyone technically is going through this learning journey. So you shouldn't feel like you're falling behind. But if we actually, the people that are getting more practical learning, in my opinion, are going to be the ones that get further ahead because they just have more muscle memory, right? I'll tie in the golf analogy as well. The more swings you get, the closer you are to a par five. Right? But if it's your first time golfing, you're not getting a par five. That's not going to happen, right? So I think we have to create that muscle memory for individuals that are coming out. And I think that's where the partnerships can really strive.
I tend to play the other par five when I'm playing on the golf course, not the one I'm
I do
actually
too.
on. So yeah, I think it's a really good point, that you made, and it's one of the things I always like to do is, and you can lead this in your company or lead this group. Find a meetup that talks about this technology in your area. Inside your company, say, hey, let's create a community of practice. Let's get a group of people together that are thinking about how they learn this. It's funny. My wife will tell me, she goes, I can tell every single time you write a post on LinkedIn and use ChatGPT. And so now I write it as like a starting point and I read it over and over again to make sure it sounds like it's in my voice. And the funny thing is when I say use my voice, and I have a private model, so it's not the public model. But when I use the private model and I say use my voice, it makes me sound like it's not me at all. It's using like, yo, man, what's going on? And I'm like, that is not how I talk in a professional way. So it's a, just because ChatGPT can spit out an answer doesn't mean that's the answer you should always use. Use your own judgment to review what you get. If you don't think a fact is right, these generative AI hallucinates. If it doesn't know an answer, it'll make up one, and it sounds really good. But fact check it. Don't just trust what you see in front of you. And so those are important things to realize. And when you're trying to look for like a job inside of a company, ChatGPT can be a great way to go look at. If I was trying to find a job to do X, who might I ask? Who might I call on in this particular type company? And then go on LinkedIn and look for that person. Or what skills might I want to learn? So you can not just use it to answer questions in your job. You can use it to answer questions and things you're looking for. Or read this article for me and tell me some of the insights I should gain from it. And then you can go through, and it's kind of like skimming, we don't read the entire article when we go through the news. You skim the headlines. If it's interesting, you read the 2 to 3 sentence description. And if you're still interested and hooked, you click into the article. So, and once you get to the article, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a 10-minute read. I have 5 minutes. Well, then throw that into generative AI, summarize this for me. What are the key points? Then you know if you should go invest the time later. So there's lots of good things you do, but just use your judgment.
Yeah, very. A couple things that I wanted to touch on based on this conversation. First and foremost, I think it is a tool to help support. It should not take away from critical thinking. I often get I could tell that you use ChatGPT as well, right? And I think when you think about the skills gaps and the really trying to solve a real life problem, Vic, you brought up a really important point, and one that we wholeheartedly believe is important when you think about the curriculum here at DeVry, is giving our students real hands-on experience so that when they go and they're talking to an employer about what they've learned, it's also, oh, and by the way, here's a portfolio, here's what I actually did. And that's just so important when it comes to technology, AI included, but technology in general. And when you're thinking about like partnerships and bridging the skills gaps, higher ed or institutions that provide sort of quick upskilling opportunities have to keep that in mind, right? What are employers looking for? What do they need? What do they want? And another reason why we have these conversations, right? We want to continue to be plugged into what the industry experts are saying, so that can inform the work that we do, so that then we can end up in ensuring that our students are successful and those that are coming through our university are successful. So really, again, helpful dialogue. This topic is obviously on the minds of many across all sectors in all walks of life. And I know we talked a lot about the skills. We talked a lot about the future proofing and all the things that AI can do, obviously when used responsibly. But there are some other things that folks are chatting in that are related to this topic. And so I wanted to make sure that we preserve a little bit of time for Q&A. So with that, Dave, I don't know if you could see some of the questions.
I can, and we've had some great questions come in, so thank you to everybody who's submitted. Why don't we take a question first that talks a bit about folks who are already established in their careers, folks that maybe are in their 30s or 40s or 50s and are working inside of organizations. What have you seen on the organizational level to value these folks, to support these folks as they try to ensure they have a relevant set of skills as they go forward? And Yo, man, Mike, maybe you could go first on this one for us.
Yeah, it's I think I made a comment earlier. It's harder to learn about a company and how it works than it is to learn a new skill. And so I think that having that transition into a new role, I think you can bring a lot of value. I get a lot of value out of having someone if I'm trying to change something in our sales organization or change something in our marketing organization, taking someone that lives that every day and then embedding them in the technology is a great way. I call it kind of a two in a box model. How do you really change that process together? And you bring that information in. The other thing is, I give an story. When I was at Schneider Electric, I came in, I had a team, we had a mainframe, and I had people tell me, like, when are you going to get rid of this thing so I can retire? But I had a workforce that had averaged, we had people that had been there 40, 45 years. They were multi-generational. And one of the things we all know is, and we've heard this since, all of us have heard it since we're young, history repeats itself. And so asking the people that have been there and through that process before, knowing what you know now, if you learn, hey, we want to invest in you to learn this. And the question I want you to answer is, knowing what you know now, what would you do different than you did the last time or the time before that when you tried to address the same problem? Because we face some of the same challenges. It's just now we have new tools and technologies and new capabilities and new things we can use to address those. How would we leverage these tools in our tool belt to address that problem now different than we did before? And so that's one of the things I extremely value from people that have been in this industry for a long time is they've got the battle scars and they know what they did the last time. And so you always know that if you did something again, like if we did this webinar over, we'd go, you know what, I wish I would have answered that question a little bit different. If we did this thing a second time, we always do that to ourselves. And so those people that have been through that process time and time again bring so much wisdom and value to that process that just it's hard to put a value on.
Yeah. I'd add to that because talking to talent leaders a lot, and actually talent leaders are starting to think about this very differently. Again, under kind of the umbrella of kind of the workforce and trying to really build the right skills in the workforce. And so what they're talking about now is no longer like traditionally you're in a particular job, you're in a particular organization, and there's a hierarchy of how you move. That's how a lot of times that career mobility happens. I think leaders are now looking at this more expansively because they have to, right? They're kind of building different skills in different parts of the organization and need to open that up beyond just looking at someone for the job that they're in and really looking at their skills. And so what I say to that question is that ability to kind of move and therefore grow and expand on your skills is kind of what I'm seeing as an appetite that human resources and business leaders are looking for now, and really trying to find ways and new solutions and new platforms that support that mobility beyond your traditional hierarchy of a job in an organization. So a lot happening in that space. So I think for employees over time, as this continues to happen, there's going to be a more agile way of building your career and therefore learning. And I think that's really exciting for most people.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to that too. I think we've kind of entered into a market post-COVID that really requires a lot of focus around transferable skills, right? I think that as people come out of higher ed and they're being kind of predisposed to all this coursework across all different majors, they're coming out as individuals that just have high learning agility. And as employers, we have to take that, value it, quantify it, and then put them into the right roles, right? And I feel like that shouldn't change for someone that's mid-career. You should still have the ability to understand what that person's learning agility is, what their transferable skills is. I'll use an example from a prior organization. I did this a couple times over where we took someone from field operations that knew field operations really, really, really well and converted them into recruiting. Because who better to sell the role than the person that's been in the role, right? Mm-hmm. It's just kind of reverse engineering the transferable knowledge that they have into a different type of role within the same industry, right? I think as HR leaders, we have to think and turn this thing on its head a couple times over to say the solution's in front of us as long as we're willing to change our mindset on how we want to operate with it.
I think
I had to chuckle, Vic. Sorry, I had to chuckle because Dave, you've pulled that play out of the playbook as well, right? For your talent acquisition team.
Yeah. Absolutely, right. Understanding those folks who have the right fundamental building blocks to be really successful at a job. If we can take that and invest to help develop then those specific skills needed for the job, I think that's when we can make great things happen both for the organization and for the individual. And I would say we're fortunate at DeVry to work with a number of partners who are really supporting their colleagues in a way where they're really investing in their development and growth. Well, thank you all for those answers. Let's go to another question from the Q&A that came in. And this question gets at, for those folks who are out in market today, I'm looking for new jobs and thinking about how can the folks make their resume stand out? In a sea of resumes, lots of folks looking for jobs in different technology-powered areas. How can folks make themselves stand out in the AI context and maybe even beyond?
I can jump in that as a start. I think AI is much more sophisticated than what it was even 5 years ago. It's no longer word searches, meaning on your resume is not about, you don't have to worry about getting the exact right words in your resume. It's much more sophisticated than that, right? And looking at kind of the work that you've done, the different types of roles you've had, and really kind of understanding what skills you're likely to have. So I would say a lot of, and we've been talking about this, like your agility, your ability to learn, in addition to kind of the work you've done. I feel like, projects you've taken, courses you've taken, kind of demonstrating that agility to continuously learn, I think is a great way to really kind of capture attention of kind of your knowledge beyond just your work or the words that are on your resume. So I feel like that's part of what's being looked for. Being able to show that becomes really important. It's not so much about the words that are on your resume and finding a way for that to stand out. It's probably more about your experiences and kind of your efforts on kind of learning and continuously learning.
Yeah, I would. Those are great comments, and the thing I would add, I look for, um, the thing I would encourage everyone to do when you're thinking about your resume is first do the research around the companies that you think you want to work for. Look at their core values and ask yourself, identify where your core values are first. Like for me, integrity matters. Make sure your video matches your audio. I value always being kind. Be hard on problems, not on people. Those are things that I value. Always being curious and continuing to learn. Persevering. I look for perseverance. How do I persevere? Because you're not going to always succeed. You're going to have failures, and so how do you learn from that and then try again? Right. Those are things that I look for. So when you look at the values of an organization, make sure that you're with that company's values aligned to what you value personally. Right. That's because culture is very important. It's for you as well. Otherwise, you'll show up as a different person at work, and you won't be able to be your authentic self. So first and foremost, make sure you do that, and then take time to get out and meet people. If you want to go work for a company or you want to go find a job, go meet people. Don't just sit behind your computer. Go out and meet people. Make personal connections. I heard Dr. James Cash was talking to a group of CIOs and said, it was a session about how do you get to the boardroom. He said the first way to get on a boardroom is know a lot of board members. That's how you get on a board. And so if you want to get a job in a company, go hang out with people that are in those types of companies, because I can tell you that I had a job posting I put up a week and a half ago. I've already had 350 applicants that came to that job. Right. And so when you have those type of job postings, it's, then I've got tons of referrals. People are figuring out who I am. They're emailing me on LinkedIn. They're going through people in the company saying, I've got someone that may be interested in this job. And so just realize that's what's going on in the background. So the more people the more you get out there, the more people connections you make. I'm a big believer that every relationship is like a bank account balance, and you got to make sure you make as many deposits in life as you can. And that way, when it comes time to draw down from those relationships, you have a balance in those accounts. So you should strive in life to make deposits in as many relationships, and it's great to do that up close. So get out and meet people. Find ways to make those connections.
I can't beat Mike's analogies. Like, I feel like I'm pretty good at analogies, but Mike, you've outdone yourself with the analogies. I will add on to both of my colleagues here. And I feel like I might be a little repetitive here, but I might just add one additional element, which is, they both mentioned like being intentful. Mike mentioned talking about having connections. I'm going to add one more element, which is tailor and storytell, right? Like, You have to imagine, right, when someone has, like for Mike, for example, that has 350 resumes to go through. On average, you're spending 20 to 60 seconds. You have 20 to 60 seconds to capture someone's attention when you have it in front of them, right? And in those 20 to 60 seconds, they have to see a couple things. One, they have to be able to read it in the language of their organization. So the research is really, really instrumental here. Understanding how the job description is written, understanding the core values, understanding how the organization speaks. You have to be able to articulate your experiences in their language. That's very important. It's undermined, but very important, because if you could say something that Mike can attest to, he's reading your resume for an extra 15 seconds, and that's achievement, right? So having the ability to custom tailor a message versus just blindly applying to 40 jobs, I would rather take that same amount of time of blinding applying to 40 jobs and take it to customizing the experience. It's interesting how that correlates to some of the things that we're talking about with AI, because that's kind of what AI does, right? It summarizes it in a customized way depending on the question that you ask. And there is an element there of like using your mindset to think about it in a very similar way as you apply for a job.
All right, I'm going to use my prerogative to ask my own question to be our last question of the session. And this one's going to be a bit of a lightning round. So always the toughest questions as a panelist. But we've talked about a lot today, a lot of great messages for all of our listeners. But if there's one thing you want each person to take away, one short, concise message that you hope everybody leaves today's webinar with, what would that message be?
I could start. I'll reframe some of the things that I said before. One, don't fall like you're falling behind, right? I think this is a brand new space. It's huge. I think of it as when Apple first released its iPod years and years ago. Everyone kind of fell in love with it. They didn't know all the components of it. And now you look at the iPhone 15, it's like a $1,500 computer in your pocket. I still learn things about my iPhone that I had no idea that I could do. So you have to be okay and to be humbled with the fact that you have to be a continuous learner. Don't fall like you're falling behind, but just be curious. I'll borrow the word that Mike used earlier, like be curious. If you're curious enough and you have an appetite of what you really know and you measure that with some of the curiosity, I'm pretty sure you can blend it in a really nice package.
Thanks, Vic.
Yeah, I would, the one thing I would say is, and it's something that builds on what Vic said earlier, which is do your homework. I tell our sales teams all the time, I said, before you just take that email and cut and paste it and replace the insert name here in the 2-line, do your homework about that person, that company, what challenges they have. I tell them, go read their annual report. You can also have ChatGPT read their annual report. Do your homework. And so it's like Vic said, do your homework on the company. Like it's exciting to work for a company that you're excited about their mission and their purpose. And there's ways you can test their core values, right? There was Patrick. I love Patrick Lencioni. He wrote a book once. He talked about Southwest Airlines and how when the pilots would come in to interview at lunch, they would all come buttoned up in their suit and tie. And at lunch, they'd say, "I want you to go to the shop here, and I want you to get a pair of shorts. I want you to come back in the afternoon with the pair of shorts on, but I want you to keep your suits off the same, and I want you to keep your wingtip shoes on, and or your dress shoes." And a lot of any pilot that said that is just humiliating. There's no way I'll do that. They said, "Thanks for coming in. You're not going to be a good fit for Southwest Airlines," because one of their core values was humor. So when you look in the recruiting process, see if there's things that they do to show their core values. Look at the news you see about the company. Are those core values coming out in their news? Talk to some of the employees that work at that company. Find out. There's some of these companies have thousands of employees. Find someone and talk to them about the culture of the organization and ask the question, does it align to their values? So do your homework. That's the one thing I say, do your homework. Don't just send your resume out to 10,000 people and then ask why you didn't get a call back. Do your homework.
And so I love everything you just said about doing your homework, be curious, continuously learn. The thing I would add to that is take away any fear of the changes and the new technology as you're embracing it so that you will embrace it, because I know the technology is intended to make your work easier. It's not intended to replace you, but it is a change. So embrace the change, understand it, understand how this will help you do even better what you do. And I spoke about this analogy earlier. I know Mike is got some of the best analogies, but I love this one, which is about when you talk about Google Maps. Those of you that use Google Maps, you're using it, even if you know exactly where you're going, exactly how to get there, you're using it because it's giving you intelligence that you may want to consider. You're still going to make the decision, but use it as a tool. And that's what the new AI and new technology coming up is intended to do. It's not intended to necessarily replace you, but really help you do your work so that you can be more productive and understand there's a workforce shortage. So that's what people are looking for. And so really embrace that change as you're learning.
Thank you. So I was really curious throughout this discussion. I took 4 pages of notes. So I just want to say thank you for just an enlightening conversation on AI in just the future of work. I want to highlight the role of, we did this throughout the conversation, but of education in shaping society's readiness for the future. At DeVry, and I've been here for 20 years. Dave's been here for quite some time as well. Our dedication to technology education, AI education, is sort of rooted in our mission, which is to equip all learners and professionals alike with the skills and the knowledge they need to thrive in careers that are continuously shaped by technological changes. I mean, it's right there in our mission. And this commitment that we have extends well beyond our classrooms and our learning environments. It's a commitment to our communities, to our partners, and to the industries we serve. So we believe in the power of education. That power of education transforms lives. And we believe, hence the topic of today's conversation, in the potential of AI to enhance that transformation. It's happening today. One other thing we believe in is hosting roundtables like this. Incredibly important when it comes to bringing together thought leaders from various backgrounds and industries. Conversations like this enable us to broaden the scope of these discussions and just engage in really meaningful and timely dialogue. So that said, today's event will be available for those who would like to share with others or revisit as a refresher. I know I'll be doing that. A lot of good nuggets throughout the conversation. So I, again, took pages of notes. Our panelists shared their thoughts on key questions around AI strategies as it relates to the workforce. And again, back to timeliness, right? This is a subject many are thinking about. So thank you to those who attended and to those who were curious as participants to dedicate this hour with us. And just big thank you to Vic, Andrea, and Mike on behalf of DeVry University and our DeVry Works organization. DeVry Works works with all of our corporate and public sort of workforce development partners. They did a lot to organize today's event. So, on behalf of them, thank you for your insightful and engaging discussion. And thanks for the work you're doing. That's quite clear in the conversation today to actively shape the future. We appreciate you, and we look forward to the continued partnership and dialogue. So thanks again for everyone joining us today. Have a great day.